And welcome to episode 42 of the DX Mentor, all about the Northern California DX Foundation, or the NCDXF as we call it. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If this is your first time that you're joining us, welcome. We have a back catalog of over 40 episodes covering many aspects of DX in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check us out. If you're new to DXing, I would really recommend episode 1 as it was recorded with several world-class DXers. You will get a feel of the excitement that goes with chasing DX. Remember, if you like what you find, please subscribe, like, and share. I would certainly appreciate it. Before we get started, I'd like to congratulate Dwight, K4YJ. Dwight finished first in Ohio in the 160-meter contest in the CW single-op QRP category. In fact, Dwight finished not only number 1 in Ohio, but number 5 in the U.S. and number 5 in North America. Dwight's a great guy. He's a great operator. Well done, Dwight. It's much deserved. Our guest today is Keviun Rowett, K6TD. Along with Joe, WAGEX, we will be discussing many things about the NCDXF, including the DQRM project, RIBS, the video library, and the Beacon network. Keviun is a passionate ham and a great representative of the NCDXF. I'm sure you will catch his enthusiasm whether we are discussing DX, the NCDXF, or the California QSO party. Without any further delay, let's get started. So good evening and welcome to the latest edition of the DX Mentor podcast. I'm really honored to be with our guest tonight. I think we're going to learn a lot, and he is truly one of the gentlemen of our hobby, and I can't wait to ask him a lot of questions. But before I talk about the gentleman, let's talk about our other host. Joe, you want to introduce yourself and say hello?
I think most people ought to know me by now, for a year and a half, 2 years now, Bill. But for those that don't, I've been licensed since 1970, come up through the ranks with all the testing, and I've been a DXer since day one. Oh, I'm just absolutely overwhelmed with DXing. And our guest tonight, Keviun, who is a good friend of mine, we were on Midway Island together years ago. And that's where I became friends with Keviun.
And that's a good lead into Keviun. Keviun Rowett, Kilo 6 Tango Delta. Tell us about yourself. How'd you get into ham radio, and then why DX?
So I joined as a ham when I was 12 years old. My father was in the U.S. Air Force, and I lived on Vandenberg Air Force Base in Southern California. And I lived there in the 70s during the heyday of the Cold War. And one of the strong companies there was Lockheed Electronics. They had a very nice club there, and a lot of my father's associates were members of the club through Lockheed. And so I joined the club, and they got me, into ham radio very thoroughly. We had a good station. Granted, it was a Holocrafters equipment, but nice station, and I got to going from there. I will admit that I, like a lot of hams, left the hobby when I managed to go off to college and had kids. But by the time I turned 30 or so, when the kids were less needy, I got back into the hobby. So I've been in it strong since then.
Wow. So I know you've been on several DXpeditions. Where have you been? And you don't have to list all of them because there's quite a few, but what are the most memorable ones?
Well, certainly my most memorable is the one with Joe, where we went to Midway out in the Pacific. That was a sort of a fly-in expedition, so it was easy. But the difficulty with that was getting permission to operate it. And it was kind of one of those things where classically DXpeditions are, there's a group leader that manages to work permission to land somewhere, and he pulls a team together. But Midway didn't, the Fish and Wildlife managed Midway at the time, they still do, and didn't want to have a group of hams just come there that they went to a group leader. So they basically opened up the applications to all hams, and then they would pick the people that would come. DXpeditions tended not to work that way because you got to have a bonded team to make this thing work. But each of us signed up, and I think it worked out that all of us got to know each other and worked as a team and as a group. Even though Midway, the Fish and Wildlife Foundation didn't acknowledge it, we elected Tom as our leader and Joe as our co-leader. So that's how I got to know those two guys. Tom, N4XP, longtime DXer, much longer than me. And that was probably the most interesting one for me. We got to do all the interesting modes. This was before FT8. And it was a nice DXpedition in the sense that the CW tent was actually the bar. So you got to operate in the bar. You remember that, Joe?
Yeah.
And the SSB was actually in a tent. Probably the biggest concern at the time, God, I can't remember what year it was the Fish and Wildlife wasn't too anxious to have people on their islands because they were afraid we were going to impact the bird population. So they told us we couldn't use any Yaggies. All we could use was verticals, which was fine for an island close to the water. But I realized the Fish and Wildlife realized there was not going to be a problem because the director, Matt, sat out on the bar outside veranda at the nighttime when all the birds came back to the island, and he watched them flying around and completely missing the antennas altogether. They specifically avoided the antennas. So we were not, so that solved the problem of birds being impacted by that. Our deadline for getting off the island was the return of the boobies, I think they were called. Very big birds, and we had to be off the island or at least have everything folded up by the time they came back. And as we were getting ready to leave the island, the first boobies started showing up. So we did our draw there.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say probably the most interesting DXpedition I was on was Baker Island, out in the middle of the Pacific, and it literally is the middle of the Pacific. It's north of the equator, just a few miles, and east of the 180 longitude, just a few miles. So it's literally the last place in the United States that sees the today before it becomes tomorrow. Probably one of the hottest places I've ever been in my life. We couldn't get out of there fast enough. And we had two people among the crew. That one was from Atlanta. Yeah, Joe, you remember, God, I can see his face, but I can't remember what he's called, N4HC. He came with Tom, and he was from Atlanta, and we had another guy, James Brooks, 9 Victor 1 Yankee Charlie, Singapore. Okay, both of those guys said Baker was hotter than their home, and I said, oh wow, it's pretty bad. But the interesting piece about Baker, besides getting it on the air and taking forever to get permission, was we were the first location to use, first DXpedition to use FT8 in the Foxhound mode. So that was fun. And we counted, I think there were 22,000 uniques that we made that we never would have worked, that we only worked them on FT8. So we never would have worked them in any of the other modes. So that was an accomplishment for us.
Sure.
And that's sort of, how did I get into DX? Well, I think DX is a natural outgrowth of just being on the radio. But I find myself more of a DXpeditioner than I do a DXer. I don't really keep track of my totals very well, and I don't work, I'll work the stations that are rare and on, but I don't work very hard to get much higher up in the ranks. But the good DXpedition comes along, I'm there. And that's sort of how I ended up on the foundation, because the foundation works on providing for funding DXpeditions to go somewhere. And so, all the trips that I've been on, the foundation funded, except for Mozambique, that was self-funded. The foundation provides money to rare and well-organized DXpeditions. So the entity has to be rare. Usually we think the top 10, but top 50 will count because sometimes it's more favorable or it's more needed in Europe than it is in the US or North America or vice versa. But so it's got to be a rare entity. We're not going to fund somebody going to New Zealand. And we even turned down a guy going to Pitcairn because Pitcairn's not very high on the most wanted list. And there's been some good DXpeditions there. So it's got to be rare. And it's got to be well organized. If somebody calls us up and says, "Oh, I want to go to so and so, give me some money," we generally turn them down. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go back to Midway just for a second.
Yeah.
Joe's talked about this before, and I think of something as simple as a basketball team or some IT project I'm managing and stuff. I can't imagine people simply saying the first 20 volunteers that raise their hand, you're all working together, and none of us know each other, and who knows if we really have a common goal, and maybe 10 of them have never left their home, and the other 10 are. So that's amazing to me. Two things, that's how they did it, but then it was so successful. I just, and I guess that's a tip of the hat to Joe and Tom and their leadership skills and making everybody feel a part of it. And so I'm kind of curious from both of you, what do you think was the critical success there, success factors? Because that is, I mean, on the surface, who would think that would be successful?
Well, I think the critical success factor was Joe and Tom, their leadership, just plain and simple. The Fish and Wildlife didn't necessarily endorse their leadership, but every one of us on the team said, Joe and Tom are it. And if Joe said do this or Tom said do this, we did it. And the interesting thing that you learn is don't do what the leadership doesn't say to do. In other words, don't go off and do things that you think are necessary without checking with Tom or Joe first. So I phrase that as don't do what the leadership didn't tell you to do.
Yeah.
So it was their leadership literally that did it. And, by the way, it was 20 of us, 16 of us, no, it's probably about 20 of us that went there. It was how many people we could get on the airplane. There's a story there, but I think it was actually close to 60 people that had originally come and gone on the list because it happens for every DXpedition. People say, yeah, they want to do it, but when it gets close, they either chicken out or something prevents them from going. So,
wow.
And Kevin, correct me, but if someone dropped off the original list, then Fish and Wildlife, they went down their list for the next person.
Yeah.
And we would not know who that next person was. And of course, I had never met Kevin, Bill, before we went to Midway.
Yeah.
So we were just a good example and been friends ever since, years later.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up there, Bill, was I had called up the Fish and Wildlife and said, put my name on the list. They said, yeah, fine, you're 45 or some number way down. I said, okay, I won't get to go. But one day my phone rang and said, you're on the list, show up. And, I called Tom and Joe and said, okay, I'm on the list. And they says, who are you?
Exactly.
So Joe, did you know Tom before then?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, those two.
But they, like if you're on a basketball team, football team, the Boy Scouts, whatever the organization is, all your friends. But in this case, it really made this so unusual. And that's where I met so many DXers, Don Greenbaum, James Brooks, guys that are well-known DXers and been on major DXpeditions. And Kevin and I met these guys on Midway under this situation, and it worked out just picture perfect. But who would have ever thought that?
Boy.
Yeah, we were surprised. Yeah.
Well, good for you. So before we jump into NCDXF, I'd like to learn a little bit about the California QSO party, because I think on your webpage, you're also a big part of that, right? I know you've never heard about it. I'll give you a minute to read, but
it's a major contest like that keeps you pretty busy in terms of operating it or managing it. So I managed it for a number of years, and I've been in it for almost every year that I can. But since I joined the foundation, I've not had time to do the California QSO party management. John Miller, K6MM, and Dean Wood, N6 Delta Echo have taken over management of the thing. So they've carried on the tradition. It's probably, I always like to tell people it's the best state QSO party out there. It's fairly early on in the season, and there's kind of a nice mix between 58 counties to work and 58 ARRL sections to work, although the Canadians have tried to spoil that a little bit. So it's a nice mix there. A lot of people get on. There's a lot of hams from California that get on to work other people. It's one of the few parties that has specifically decided that they're not going to support RIDI or FTA. So it's CW and phone only, which makes it unique and interesting. Lots of participation. I can tell you that the management of it coming up to the date that it starts, there's always a ton of things to do. The biggest challenge is getting all 58 counties on. And it's finding people to go to different counties that are working county expeditions. Something that N6 Delta Echo Dean did in the last few years is he refreshed the contest in terms of awards and categories and things of that sort to make it more interesting. So,
Do I recall it's 2 different time periods, or is it just one time period?
One time period starts at 9 a.m. and goes to on Saturday and goes to 4 p.m. on Sunday.
Okay.
Well, there are others that do it in 2 time periods, but California just said, nope, we're going to tough it out. Starts, and it's funny because most of the Southern Californias have a good population of hams in them. Inyo County, not so much, but most of the Southerns. But it's the far northern counties, Siskiyou, Glenn, Modoc, El Dorado County. Or El Dorado's okay, but Sierra doesn't have. So there's no hams in them. So people regularly go camp out in those counties. So you got to wear shorts somewhere. You got to have your winter parka with you. So it's always fun dragging your radios and everything out there to get it set up and working.
Well, good. I was just curious. It's something I want to carve out some time and try to participate in some year, and it always seems to fall on a bad weekend, but I appreciate that.
Well, the obvious, some of the draw to the California QSO party is we give away a bottle of wine from one of the members. We don't do that so much anymore because it's gotten so very hard to ship wine, but that was the big draw for a long time.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the foundation then, the NCDXF, sure. and some of the in from 30,000 foot view. What is it? What is the NCDXF?
It's technically a foundation, so we've got a if you will, a pile of money that we operate as a foundation, which is if legally it's a foundation, which says there's a board of directors and the money has to be used for the purpose named in the bylaws. And the bylaws state that our mission is that we're to supply funding to financial support to DXpeditions traveling to rare entities that are well organized. Recently, we've added that we're also there to increase the skills of DXpeditioners and technology and things of that sort, which is sort of how the RIB got born in the video library. So that's what it is at the 30,000 view. I think the foundation has been a major financial contributor to every rare entity for the last 25 years or so, maybe more. The board is made up of people that have all been extensive DXpeditioners. And so one of the things we offer to people is a fair amount of advice about how to conduct it. So we usually find the people going to rare places are very experienced at this, but they still manage to find some value in our knowledge.
Sure.
One of the most experienced guys that we funded often was Bob Alp and for Echo Uniform, and I can't UE, yeah, Joe's and mine's nemesis. Bob recently passed away, right. But he managed to make it to 10 of the top 10 entities at the time. So he knew a lot about doing this, but he still appreciated our guidance occasionally. So, and many of our members went on trips with him.
So there are times when, something will be announced and they say they're going to be presenting to the NCDXF and requesting funds. What kind of presentation is it? I've always pictured it's an extremely business-like, very formal presentation, because the last thing, like you said, you'd want is me calling you up and saying, Joe and I need a couple $1,000s in airfare to go to an island off the coast of Iceland. And yeah, okay, that's not going to happen. So I imagine it's a very formal process. It's very well detailed.
Yeah, so we've actually formalized it on our website. There's a DX application, an application to go somewhere. And it asks, questions like who's going, where are you going? Do you have your permits to do that? What's the date you're going there? How much money do you want? What bands are you going to operate? What equipment are you going to take? So that we get a good overall view, and who are the people going with you? And, we ask other questions like, how many of the people are going with you, or are they NCDXF members? What else do we ask? Yeah, that summarizes it. And then we also ask for a budget. We have an Excel sheet that we ask them to fill out a budget. We have some guidelines on our sheet where we won't pay for airfare. Because the arrangement is classically operators have to pay to get to where it is where the boat leaves from. That's always been the arrangement. So we tell them we won't pay for airfare for the operators. Joe, you look like you're going to say something.
Well, I was going to ask you, Kevin, can you give us a little history about the foundation? How did it originally start?
Yes, I can. The money, so it was a trust fund that was given to us by the Colvins long time ago. It's 50 years old now. It was started out, one of the original board of directors members was W6EE, what's his first name? Wes Chin, I think. He's still alive, and I had lunch with him, last year. I didn't have it this year, but last year I did. Still very active ham. He's not so much an active ham, but he's still a very active person. He's a CPA. So basically the money came from that foundation that those two people had created from contributions made to them. And they said, you need to, it's useful to fund money or have money available for funding expeditions to, rare and well-organized places, because some of the places are very expensive to get to. We're sort of in the category of, we see people wanting to spend, 250 to 1.1 million to get somewhere. So, we do what we can to be part of that. Long ago, the arrangement was we would basically provide enough money that would cover the cost of one operator. In other words, we would be one more operator that would go along, if you will, in terms of money that was sent. Each operator is expected to put in a contribution to the kitty to fund the expedition, and we would be one extra operator in terms of amount. But in the last several years, the places that people have gotten so expensive that we're probably putting in as much as 4 or 5 operators worth of money now. Not because the other people have gotten cheaper. It's just that locations have gotten more expensive. And that's a function of rarer and rarer places are getting populated now. It's now down to places that are hard. We say that places are rare now for primarily 2 reasons, one of 2 reasons or both. One is it's very hard to get permission to operate there. Midway was a prime example of that. I know Don and Tom worked for many years to get permission to operate on Midway, but getting to it was a plane flight. It was 5-6 hour plane flight for us from Hawaii. So it was easy to get to. And we shipped a big cargo container full of equipment there. Yeah. So that was easy to do. The other reason is it's hard to get permission. The other reason is that it's difficult to get to. So example of that would be Beauvais. Beauvais Island, 3 Yankee 0 Bakers, what the last call sign was. It's easy to get permission to go there. The Norwegian Polar Institute will give you a permit just for asking. So there's no issue getting permit to operate there, but man, is it hard to get there. Most desolate place in the world to get to. So, and probably the most wanted entity right now is North Korea. Easy to get to, you can fly into it, you can walk into it, but man, you just cannot get permission to operate. So there's a few places that are hard to get to, and it's hard to get a permit to operate in. Glorioso, some of the French TAAF islands in the Indian Ocean are a little hard to get to, and it's very hard to get permission to operate. The Z Delta or the ZD operation to the island off of South Africa, that was hard to get to because you had to get on a boat, and it was 3 or 4 days ride out, and it was very hard to get the government to let you operate. So that's the kind of things we do.
Okay. I went over the website, and there were several things that jumped out, and one of my favorites we're going to save till the end. So if we can we talk about the DQRM project? I think this is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but we've had not a lot of success.
Wow.
This falls under our heading of technology and help the world of DXing out. And so what we did is in April 2023, now over a year ago, we created a fund of $100,000 to fund somebody to come up with a solution for this. The reason we've not had much success is people didn't want to offer us solutions. They wanted to offer us ideas. They wanted us to go build the solution.
Well,
And-
let me interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
DQRM is deliberate QRM, right?
Yeah.
So it's you're trying to carry on a QSO and somebody's keying up or talking over you or whatever. Okay, sorry.
And that happens often with DXpeditions, where somebody turns on their transmitter over the top of the DX station so no one else can hear them. So and so the idea was locate where it was. We, part of the issue, and we said we'll sidestep that issue for now, was so how do you enforce it? What do you do? How do you penalize somebody? We said, we'll worry about that later. Let's come up with a technique for finding who it is in the first place. Some people sometimes put pirates into the category of DQRM. We do. So that was part of our definition was, if you could help identify a pirate, that would help. The FT8 guy, Joe Taylor, K1JT, has cooked up a scheme that he thinks works very good for keeping pirates off the air or away from people on DXpeditions using FT8. So we'll see. So that may help with that one. But the problem is there are a handful of solutions out there, but nobody wants to step up and say, yeah, I'm going to implement that solution.
Gotcha. Yeah, I noticed there was a DXpedition that when you work them, they would send you a serial number, and then you would go to the website, and if it was a legit serial number, it was a legit QSO.
Yep.
And if it wasn't, it wasn't. And I was thinking for a while, we had a chance to talk to Ned, AA7A,
Yep.
and he mentioned this, and Joe and I were talking about it over lunch, and it's kind of like if everybody had digital radio, so everyone had, we're all speaking digital, you could encrypt certain things just like in networking, but as soon as you want to throw an analog radio in there, then the scheme doesn't work. So it's a challenge. I mean, it's really going to be interesting. And yet I got to hunt, somebody will come up with something to at least help offset.
Yeah, there are several good solutions out there already well known for this. The FCC does it regularly, but they obviously won't deploy it for the worldwide, and they won't share it. Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio has cooked up a very good scheme in conjunction with Flex Radio, but they're just too busy to spend any time on it. They say 100,000, yeah, triple that, and we might talk to you.
Yeah, we might start.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or multiply it by 10 and we might start. So that's the magnitude of the problem. So we keep working on it. We don't have a solution yet, but in the last board meeting we just had in April, we said, don't give up yet. Let's not give up on this one. So
Good.
Wow.
Good.
So in 2018, Joe, we had a our first W8 DXCC convention here.
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah.
2019. But one of the things we heard about was this box that they could drop off on islands. And so Joe got a hold of Greg Marco, and he and Hal Turley were like, heck yeah, we'll drive it up from Atlanta to Cincinnati, no problem. So they actually brought it up, they put it on display, and so I think we actually were some of the guys that got the first public view of that.
Yes.
And I know Greg's probably on the third or fourth iteration, but boy, hats off. That's another thing you guys provide such a great service for, and supporting projects like that. Can you talk about the rig in a box or the rib idea?
yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about the history of it in a minute, but the basic idea is George AA7 JV basically built a large container that has a Flex 6700 in it, and a tuner and power supplies and an amplifier. And it's self-contained. It's water cooled. So you put a radiator out externally, generator and antennas, drive it on the island, drop it down, and you can get it on the air. It uses a 900 megahertz radio link back to the boat, and then you operate from the boat. The idea behind it, or the motivation behind it, was that you could have less footprint on an island to get it on the air. George developed it very heavily during his contesting operations in the Cayman Islands. And finally, when his boat was ready, the magnet, he took it on the road to the Pacific Islands. And, we operated North Cook and VP60, Ducey with it. And we used a lot of remote operators as well through Starlink. So that worked well. And it's probably the central piece to getting permission to operate on Jarvis. The idea, part of the issues with people not getting permission to go to islands is that the classic DXpedition footprint is 10 to 20 people, tents, food, boat, antennas. They stay there 2 weeks, and it's kind of I wouldn't say it's a big mess on the island because everybody cleans up themselves. You can't tell anybody was there when they leave. But nonetheless, the Fish and Wildlife folks and other entities like that worry about having that footprint on the island. And so this is a way to not have the footprint on the island. You don't need to put any people there. Plus, it's so much easier to operate if you don't have to put tents on the island, live on the island and whatnot. So the number of people is much less. So that was the idea. It's worked out very well, and we'll see how well it works with Jarvis. Greg took it a little farther and built what we call the next generation rib. And him and Hal took it to Juan Fernandez, Charlie Baker Zero, where a lot of us operated as well. It was a K3S, worked out very well. So it's an idea. Is it something for everybody? Maybe. There's a number of DXpedition leaders that just flat out don't want to have a rib. Why not? Well, they don't think it's real HF contesting. Not contesting, but DXpeditioning. But for rare entities where it's hard to get permission to go on to someplace, I think the ribs will be something that happens a lot.
I thought the recent announcement by IOTA was a really very smart compromise on their part. So if I understand it correctly, at Jarvis, oh, you're laughing, maybe not. At Jarvis, all the sideband folks will be on the boat, therefore, and they're in essentially the waters close enough that IOTA will recognize you're not on the island, but you're close enough. But all the rest of us that are operating as remote operators, those will not count for IOTA. Is that correct?
That's the decision, if you will. Yeah, it was kind of funny because IOTA's rules have always been the operators have to be on the island. And so there's been a couple of very good, 3 rib operations in recent history where none of the QSOs counted because they were all remote operators, or the operators were not on the island. So the IOTA guys have, several years ago, they created a entity or a way to get an exemption. You could apply for a particular DX operation as a exemption to their rule. But we all believe that the IOTA will never allow anybody an exemption for that. And the rules for that will never change until the current president passes away, becomes a silent key. IOTA is what it is.
Yeah.
Different set of rules. But they did allow that, okay, it's all right if you're on the boat. It's not okay if you're a remote operator, but it's okay if you're on the boat.
Yeah.
So things are changing. So we'll see.
So,
I think it's, go ahead, Joe.
Some of us think that the rib will open the door for Fish and Wildlife and some of these hard places, to get to. And I take it you guys feel the same way?
Yes. We do know that specifically for the Jarvis application and use case, determination of special use case was because of the rib. Because they don't want anybody on the island. You remember the fun we had with Baker and whatnot, or not Baker, but Midway.
Yeah.
And Baker was even worse. They were very worried about contamination with all the people there. So that's, it's very true, like you say, that the Fish and Wildlife guys will be much more amenable to a rib type operation.
Yeah, so one of the things we always try to do, Kevin, is, and I've not been on a DXpedition, but I've been around Joe and other guys enough to get a lot of the details. But what I never thought about, and I know people don't think about, it's like when you leave the island, everything leaves the island. So the latrines, the cooking garbage, everything leaves the island. So the ability to be floating off that island close enough for it to count and the transmitter's still there has just got to make it so much easier that and smarter, it really makes it smarter. So hats off to you guys. And the other thing I'll touch on, and I'll put a link in the show notes, but they've also created a really cool landing craft, right? It's it kind of leaves the boat and it floats in, but has wheels that engage, and on it are 2 ribs and antennas and generators, and they just drive it to where they want to put the stuff up. So they're up in an hour and a half. They probably have multiple stations running, right?
Yeah, and George has had enough practice now. It used to be there was 2 or 3 trips out to the island every day to fix something. But now he basically has to go out there once a day at the most.
Wow.
So I was going to tell you the story of how the rib got started.
Please.
So when we were planning Baker, I turned to Ned and said, wouldn't it be great if some people could operate from the boat? And he says, yeah, let's do that. So we basically tried to implement the rib for the first time on Baker. We failed because there were some problems with it and it was just too hot. Ned and I looked at each other and says, we don't have the strength or the energy to fix the problems. So it didn't work. But George looked at it and says, this is the answer. And so he took it on and turned it into a very successful project. So
Yeah,
Wow.
good for him.
That is really neat. So what I think is I'll switch gears on you.
Yep.
One of the best kept secrets, I think in radio and certainly for NCDXF is that one of my jobs in the club is in the Southwest Club is to always get programs. And I talk to other guys and they're like, do you have any interesting programs? Do you have any interesting? And I always forget that there's this NCDXF video library and it is comprehensive.
Yeah.
Wow. So can you touch on that for me?
yes, I can. First of all, I got to tell you, so the video librarian just changed from K6LRN to K6GFJ. LRN's is having some health problems and he's got some house problems. He lives up in wildfire country in California. So Ross now has all the video library at his place. So it's basically a video that was made by somebody on the DXpedition for every expedition that the foundation has funded for probably 25 years that I know of. Many of the videos were made by James Brooks, 9 Victor 1 Yankee Charlie. In real life, in professional life, he is a video photographer.
Oh,
videographer, I guess it's called. And he runs a business in Singapore that basically sells and edits and sells videos. So he's well equipped and he brings professional cameras and very good editing. You look at his videos and you just go, man, that's super good. That is just, you can feel the energy of the DXpedition. You can feel like you're really there. It's always composed with some great music. So that's basically a lot of how the video library came about. And he inspired a lot of other people on DXpeditions he didn't go on to also do a good job. So that's what's happened and that's how it came about. In recent years, most of the video library has been available online. So that's one of the things we're trying to do is get links to the online version of stuff so people can look at it without having to ask us to mail them a tape or a CD.
so is that open to anyone, or do you have to be an NCDXF member, or
Anyone, just go to the website and get it.
Okay, well, I'll put a link. That's terrific. Boy, I got to remember that. So what about estate planning? I mean, I don't want to bring us down, but that's also, I think, a really excellent opportunity.
So the foundation is funded by people that donate, contribute money to us. We have a large number that give us $50 a year, and that's very valuable. We also have a number of people that put us in their wills or their estates that have increased the foundation's amount by a fair amount. So when they pass on, they'll send us, however much money was included in that. We've had people donate their entire life savings to us, and we've had people donate a percentage of it. Another aspect is, as we all turn older a little bit, our 401ks have a required minimum distribution at age 73. It used to be age 70, but now it's 73. And it's taxable. One way you can avoid the tax is to donate the RMD to the foundation. And that way you don't have to pay the tax on it. So.
Okay, and then everyone benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So the other thing, we were fortunate enough, I've seen Glenn Johnson twice do the NCDXF rock collection, which when he first mentioned it, I half thought it was an April Fool's joke or something, but it's really interesting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So just a side note, Glenn is the longest serving board member on the present board. He's been on the board longer than anyone else. Not by any means is he the longest board member we've ever had. That goes to Rusty W60AT. But Glenn is our longest serving member, and we depend upon him very heavily for history and other things. And yes, he did establish a rock collection. And one of the things we ask, we don't demand, we ask of DXpeditions is bring a rock back for the collection. So we've got lots and lots and lots of rocks. But every DXpedition that goes out, he's asking them for rocks. So, we'll see how long it takes for him to get to the honor roll.
Well, he had it at Sedco a couple years ago down in Tennessee, and
Yeah.
I was wondering what kind of car he had that he could put that that whole thing in it. And they're still small rocks, but when you
Still.
contain, you contain them correctly and label them, and you put 250 of them together, it's pretty impressive. So,
Yeah, he's going for 357.
okay. So the one that I'm most interested in is the Beacon project. And I used to operate a lot from my car, and I've got about an hour commute. So every time I'd leave, the first thing I do is I had an app on the phone. I'd throw that on. I could see where the propagation was, and just throw the rig over there and drive up I-71 and not worry about it, and know that there'd be some propagation there. So if I recall, either you have implemented like a phase 2, or you're going to implement a phase 2. But can you define that for us and then tell us about it?
Sure. I think it's been almost 10 years ago. We refreshed all the equipment that all the beacon operators had. There's 18 of them around the world, and on the website you can see the locations of them. But they're strategically placed such that if anywhere in the world you can listen and find out if there's propagation on the higher bands to a location that you want to hear to. So we basically refreshed the equipment and made sure that the system was working as expected. One of the things we tried to do is vastly improve the antenna, but there just wasn't room in most locations to do that. So people are still using the MFJ MA5V as the antenna, but new controller, new radio, new power supply and cabling and all that stuff. So, and the beacons are basically made up of, like I said, 18 sites, and there's a sequence they go through. So when their turn comes up in the wheel, it's a 3-minute wheel, so to speak, they will start on 20 meters and then move up the bands, to 18, 15, 12, and 10. And they'll transmit it at power levels of 100 watts, 10 watts, 1 watt, and 100 milliwatts. So in a stepping fashion, 1 second each. So you can sort of get an idea how good the propagation is. So we work hard to try to make sure all the beacons stay on the air. We have 3 off the air right now, one of which the operator passed away, and the operator passed it to has struggled a bit with it. That's the Tanzania 5ZJ beacon. The other 2, Madeira, Charlie Sierra 3 Baker. Unfortunately, they had a pretty bad wildfire, and the house that it was in burned to the ground along with all the equipment. So we're trying to replace it. And then Hong Kong VR2 Baker was off the air because a typhoon knocked the antenna down.
So Keviun, every one of the beacons are pretty, they're all at another ham's location at his house, and he sort of maintains it and be sure it's operational.
Yes, that is correct. If it weren't for the operators, there would be no beacons on the air.
Yes.
I mean, we basically supply the idea and the equipment and the timetable, and the operators take it on, they plug it in, they keep it working, they let us know when there's problems. The controllers have not been a problem since we went to a new design, but the radios are perennially a problem. We still haven't found a radio that'll withstand the beacon cycles, on 24 hours a day. Every 3 minutes they're up and running. So the radios break about once every 4 or 5 years. And we've had some local operators just simply repair the radios. The ZS6 guy, Gary, he's very good at radio repair. In real life, he's a medical doctor, but he says, "Oh, I can fix this." And I sent him the service manual, he fixed it and put it back on the air.
Sure.
So other cases, like VE8 Alpha Tango up in it's not in the Yukon anymore. It's in Anoya Bay, Inwet Bay. He had no idea how to repair the radio, so I just sent him a new radio, got the old one repaired. So, but if the operators didn't maintain them and keep them going, they'd all be gone off the air. So,
Sure.
Well, Joe's been looking for a way to give back to the hobby. What do you think about Tanzania, Joe?
Yeah, I could go there.
yeah, okay, we'll sign you up, Joe. We'll sign you up.
Yeah, sign him up.
I was on a mission once to try and visit every one of the beacon sites. I actually operate one not far from my house. So I made it to that one, obviously. I made it to the one in Hawaii, and I made it to the one in New York. That's it. I haven't made it any farther. So,
Yeah.
Keviun, all the equipment on all the beacons are the same equipment, same antenna, same radio, power supply.
Yep, we tried to make sure it was the same one everywhere.
Yes.
And we
Yeah.
did succeed at that. You know, because it's easier to maintain that way, replace equipment, and
Sure.
and we can test it very thoroughly before we send it out. N6XG, Walt Wilson, has been my partner in doing this, and he's tested every piece of equipment to no end, run it several days. So, yep.
I had a conversation with a ham down at Hamcation in Orlando last what was that, February, and he was talking about the reverse beacon network, and it's just a great idea. And I said, well, you know, there is another way you can do this with just your radio. Well, how would you do that? I kind of talked about what I knew about the beacons at the time, and it was like, wow, that's really cool. And I can just tune to a frequency. And I said, yeah, that's the great thing. You either hear them or you can, and it becomes pretty simple. So hats off to you guys, all these great programs. So
Yeah.
Couple of notes about the beacon I'll make for you.
please.
You know, one of the questions we had is when we were upgrading the equipment and replacing it, we talked about alternatives. We finally settled on the same format because it's tried and true and it works. You just need your ears to be able to hear it. We also asked the question, is it interesting anymore? Should we just stop doing it because of RBN? You know, is the beacons needed anymore? We sort of swept that issue aside and went ahead with it. But the first couple we deployed had a bug in the software, and it was off frequency. It wasn't off frequency, it was off time. We heard from three-letter government agencies about that within a day. We're going, why do you care? And they said, well, we can't tell you, or we'll have to kill you if we do. But they cared. They actually cared. And when a beacon falls off the air, almost always it's a government agency that tells us before the operator does.
Really?
Yeah, I was shocked. And then we found 3 or 4 different professors at universities that use the beacons in propagation study, and they tell me right away when a beacon's not operating correctly. So, that was a surprise.
It occurred to me after the eclipse, but I was putting our little agenda together. That's not the one I sent you, but just putting ideas down. That might have been really interesting to tune into during the eclipse. We had in my area, almost a total eclipse, and that I don't know, it could have been interesting. I don't know how much it would have changed, but I won't be able to test that again in my lifetime. So
we've thought about participating in the propagation studies for that, but none of us have had any time.
Yeah. So you've bumped into somebody and they say, hey, give me your 30-second explanation of why I should join NCDXF. I'm an avid DXer or I'm a beginning DXer, it doesn't matter. Well, why should I join?
Because we supply the funding and the educational resources to make sure that the more rare entities actually get on the air. And even those that aren't quite so rare, but are still very interesting to you, because we hear people that say, yeah, I need Clipperton, the one that was on most recently. They need Clipperton in a different band mode, so that's what we do. So it's a way, and it's a focused entity that makes sure that rare DX is happening.
So I have donated, right? So I've donated X dollars. How can I get more involved with what you guys are doing? I love the newsletter. I really enjoy it. But what can I do to get more involved in what you're doing?
I hate to say it, but I think the more involved part is contribute.
That's okay. I mean, that's why I'm asking.
Because we're not trying to change ham radio. We're not trying to fix ham radio. We're just trying to make sure that there's money and support for rare, well-organized DXpeditions. And so, we're able to successfully do that mission. Obviously any suggestions you have, we're very willing to listen to. But right now it's mostly making sure that our fund stays viable. And certainly if you hear about DXpeditions, tell us, or if you hear about a group forming that wants to do a DXpedition, tell us. Okay. I will tell you, we hear about many, many things before they're even close to getting done. Like I can't tell you how many plans there are for Beauvais right now. Ken knows he didn't do a good job, and we've counted 4 entities planning to go back to Beauvais.
Yeah.
So,
So I will tell you this last time around with Ken, and you know, I've heard nothing but great things about the guy. I mean, he's persistent, you know, as can be. But I got like I'm the president of Swadex, and Joe's the guy in
Yeah.
charge of grants. And pretty honest, we're kind of looking to see, okay, what's NCDXF going to do? Because if you guys are dragging your feet and you're far more in tune than we would ever be, that's probably an indicator that maybe we'll just wait.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what we find. And as I describe it to the team, applications will come in and I look at them and I say, the guy is simply looking for a good housekeeping stamp of approval, you know, and sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's no, we're not going to do it, you know. So, but there's some people that come in and we look at it and say, yeah, that's a good plan. Let's see your boat contract and things of that sort. Or, you know, it's a DXpeditioner that we've never met before. Not anybody that's ever done this before. Tell us more about yourself and whatnot. So
Right.
it's rare that we run across somebody that we don't already know. Very, very rare.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Bill, I wish I could tell you exactly what to do, but
It's okay. I
No.
mean, Joe and I may have a bake sale. We'll once a quarter, and we'll just send you the proceeds, you know?
that's excellent. That helps us more than anything else right now.
But
Yeah.
one thing I never thought about again until I went through the website was I don't think our club's ever made a donation to NCDXF.
Oh.
Has it, Joe?
Boy, you know, I don't recall, Bill.
And we
I don't
consider,
think so.
and you know, because of the DXpedition of the year that we grant and stuff, we
Right.
consider ourselves, you know, a pretty important club, but we've never done that.
No, I don't think so. Kevin, do you have anything from the foundation that is breaking news that you could tell us to put out on the podcast?
Sure. Watch your news sources, DX news sources for a Bouvet trip. We've recently settled a lot of the DX or a lot of the trip wars for Bouvet, and we've provided some conditional funding to a specific group. And Bouvet will happen again in 2025. There's a very good group going again this time. And as we said, from when Ken came back, they learned tremendously what not to do. So
Yes.
yeah, there is a great, there is a, watch your news sources for, I'm sure that, because we recently voted yesterday about a Bouvet package for a particular group that we think has got it figured out. And I think they'll probably open up their plates. And you saw Ken turned around and stopped his donations to his
Yes.
trip. So because of the other activities that's going on. So yeah, watch your news sources for some information about Bouvet.
Good.
So not to put you on the spot. So what about Peter the First then? As far as you know, would that still go on?
Well, we have not received an application specifically for Peter 1,
Okay.
but we do know that the same group that's trying to make Bouvet go is trying to get Peter the 1 the next year.
Okay.
I
Yes.
happen not to need Peter 1, so I don't care so much.
Ah,
See, that's Kevin, that's rarely a luxury I have. So
The other piece of sort of negative news is we hear nothing about Scarborough Reef. So, you know, no news there. Yeah, Scarborough Reef, we hear nothing about. The TAAF Islands, Glorioso and Reunion, there is a group going to go there. I don't know if they've announced it yet or not, but we've granted them funding. So
what about Prattis? I don't think in my life of a DXer since 71, I've ever heard Prattis on the air. I know it was, but
what's the call sign?
oh, of course you're gonna ask me, I don't remember. BS is Scarborough, right?
Yes.
yeah, it's
Spratly. You're thinking of Spratly.
That's what I meant. That's exactly what I meant. Yep.
I don't think Spratly will be back on the air. I think it's gonna ultimately be changed to be a BY entity.
Okay.
yeah,
Because it's mostly a paved airport now.
yeah.
So
Very, very interesting.
yeah, and that's one of the pieces we don't get involved in is the DXCC list. People ask us and we say we're not the ARRL, and we don't have any ability to lobby them. We don't know anybody that does, but we try not to weigh in on this or that. terms of whether it should be an entity or not. So we've funded expeditions that have weighed in on that, but as a group, we try not to.
Okay, very, very interesting. Wow. Joe, did I leave anything out?
No, sir. Picture perfect.
So I would say my last comment about the foundation is as we look at what the next 5 years hold, we're not sure. It used to be we would wait for an application to come in and we'd look at it and say, yeah, that makes sense, or no, here's the problem. And but many of the rare places have already been covered, and there's not as many interesting places to go anymore. So we're kind of not seeing much interesting applications. I think we finally got the Beauvais one worked out in terms of funding. But the other places, we just don't see a lot of interesting people going to interesting places or interesting places left that are people can get to. People come to us and say, well, would you work on with the ARRL to get them to delist P5? I go, we're not fighting that battle. So we're looking, Bill, you asked, how do you help the foundation? I would say the thing is to think of a way or things that we should be looking at that deal with the problem of there aren't as many interesting entities as there once was.
Okay.
10 years ago, we started just everybody and their brother was going lots of interesting places, and we were just doing our very best to keep up with that. But now it's like, okay, another trip to Pitcairn, another trip to Clipperton, or
Yeah.
So
I kind of feel bad for and maybe it's not fair, but the Austral Island guys that are there now, because there was a group there, right? Not too long ago.
Yes.
And they did a heck of a job, and I'm sure these guys will do a heck of a job too, but the demand isn't there, especially with Bhutan on the air at the same time. And
yeah, although I will tell you, for all the expeditions we hear, we never hear them say that there isn't a demand for the places they're at.
Sure.
So they always go, and they always have a good time, and they always supply some level of demand. I think the DX challenge has helped with that a lot, and the UK club starting it over every time at the beginning of the year helps. So, but yeah, it's not every place is as rare as the others, but there's still a demand for many places.
Sure.
So,
Kevin, has anybody been to Midway since we were there?
there was a guy that was stationed there that was operating, but he didn't produce much in terms of QSOs. That's on the list of places we want to try and get back to with the rib. But before that, we're trying to get to Cure Island.
Because there was a fella that was with you and I on Midway was here for the eclipse at our house. And he told me he was planning 3 or 4 of them trying to go to Midway. So
there has been a group that tried to get there. You remember Ron, whose last name I don't remember. He didn't go with us, but he was trying to take a boat to there, but he never managed to come up with a viable thing.
Permit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were ready to fund him, but he never could get a permit. Never could get a boat contract either. So.
Interesting.
I will tell you, over the years, for many, many years, I would give like $20 a year because with you got the family and everything else going on. But I always wanted to just and every time I contacted someone from NCDXF, and there were a lot of different times, just very simple questions. I never had anybody say to me, "Well, I spent some time with you, but how much did you donate?" I mean, everyone was very willing to just help me with whatever. So hats off to you guys. And then I would really encourage anybody that's listening. It's a very easy way to help promote DXpeditions. Just to say, as much as I joked about a bake sale, you could raise $35, $50, $75, send it in, because it's absolutely going to make a difference.
It does. Yeah. Bill, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So I imagine all they need to do is go to, and I will put this out there, but there's a contribute button, and they put their call and their amount, and they contribute. And I don't even know how long it's been on my QSL card. I've always had the NCDXF logo. So,
good.
It's kind of like, hey, I really do support this stuff, and it's fun. So, Joe, take us home, buddy. Anything else?
It's a great organization, and I agree. Everybody needs to donate. And of course, don't forget my retirement fund.
Yeah. Well, you don't have any story about Kevin getting thrown out of a bar in Hawaii or anything to close with?
I got stories about Joe happening to Joe, but I never got thrown out of the bar.
But don't tell him everything now, Kevin.
Some things we don't spread.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a good laugh because we had the Swains guys on a couple of weeks ago, and,
They're
Joe
great.
said, "Well,
They're
heck,
great.
I was on Swains," and they said, "Yeah, I think there was a couple girls we met. They had daughters with the last name Pater. I don't know where we went with that, but
Exactly.
oh my goodness." Well, Kevin, thank you so much. This has really been entertaining. It's really enlightening. And I would encourage anyone, if they have questions, they can send them to me, the dxmentor@gmail.com. They certainly can contact you, K6TD, or go to the Northern Cal website. Again, I'll put that in there, but go to the info tab and get your questions answered. And I really encourage everyone to stay involved and contribute what they can, and then enjoy the newsletters because it's a great source of information. Pull down the video libraries for yourself or for your club and use that and have some fun with it. Tremendous amount of resources. And again, my favorite thing has been the Beacon project, operating mobile. That was just huge for me. It just allowed me to immediately get to the bands that were open and frankly, very quickly find out nothing was open. This was 8 or 9 years ago, and just listen to the FM radio. So
There you go.
all righty, sir. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, and Joe. Thank you as always, and we'll be in touch. If there's anything we can do, Kevin, on our end out here, let us know. Please contact us, and we'd be happy to do whatever it is. So,
Thanks for me and Kevin. We appreciate your time, and tell Lynn I said hello.
I will, Joe.
Okay, buddy. Good night.
Thanks for your support, guys.
good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Was that interesting or what? Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would also like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than these sponsors. I would especially like to thank our guests today, Kevin, K6TD, and Joe, W8GEX. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur-related issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something, more information, or if you just have a question, email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Please drop me a line if you have achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or have a DX event or an activity that you'd like us to mention. I would be happy to do that. If you're enjoying these DX Mentor podcasts, remember, subscribe, like, and share. 7 threes for this episode, and thanks to my ex-wife Karen for her love and support. I'll see you in the pile-ups.